ask you a quick question. Have you heard a phrase called third time is a charm? Yes. So you know what it means. So especially in Silicon Valley, from the Silicon Valley perspective, what I would say is like many entrepreneurs, because the wind over here gets everyone excited to start something, right? You see Slavik, you see Rishi, you see a number of you entrepreneurs who've been there already, and they say, I got to do something, right? So you try first time and don't succeed or make some progress, learn, then you try again second time, same thing, and then third time you really succeed big time. That's why the phrase called third time is a charm, right? However, there are obviously some folks who really know how to create success first time, then second time. So this is how we have an amazing entrepreneur here today, Slavik, who founded Demisto back in 2015, ran like a bullet train, because we have, by the way, one of the other company competitors, entrepreneur, will be here in November. Then you can ask him questions about Slavik and Demisto and Rishi, etc. But so anyway, Demisto was pioneered. They were part of this new space called SOAR, S-O-A-R, which is security, orchestration, automation, and response space in the whole security space. Security is an interesting thing. In late 90s or early 90s, if you remember, the only thing you knew was antivirus software from Norton, which is Symantec now, probably kind of withering away. But anyway, so and then other ones. And so now the whole security industry itself, every year, do you know how much the whole security space is every year, the market? Anyone? Other than the security guys? Other than the security Demisto, Palo Alto guys? Okay, yeah, sorry. So how much, do you know what the whole market every year, people, the companies or organizations are spending on the security space? Just a guess. Let's
75 billion.
75 billion. Any other numbers?
300.
Any other? Okay, it's somewhere in the 100, who said 300, right? Did someone say? So, okay, it's about, I think, 150 or so, I think, this year, but growing, and in next, it's supposed to be 200 to some billions over in next 3 to 4 years, sorry. So it's a huge space now in itself, right? So, and I think it's going to become even more and more, because as you know, we are all digitally connected. 10 years ago, you didn't know, you didn't want to put your credit card numbers in your mobile. Now you don't even think about it, even though you get hacked next time. So, right? So that's why you need all these companies to protect you. So it's a huge space, and there's a big, even within that space, this SOAR is the most rapidly growing market segment. So that's why I was talking about the cybersecurity space. And so not only Slavik and the team, his co-founder Rishi is also here. And so they created this into a leading platform, but also they created a highly effective go-to-market strategy with over 150 customers, out of which quarter of them were Fortune 500 companies and large organizations in healthcare, high tech, and financial services and other verticals before, and then they got acquired by Palo Alto Networks for $560 million within less than 4 years. So obviously you're gonna ask him all the questions, how these guys did it. Make sure you learn and just write it down. Okay. Earlier, he was VP and CTO of database security at McAfee. There, he joined again via his acquisition of his earlier company, Sentrigo, where he was co-founder and CTO. And so he's over 20 years of experience. I'm not going to take too much of time with that. Without taking the thrill from his story, I'd like to invite Slavik Markovich, who is Senior Vice President at Palo Alto, to share his exciting story. Let's give him a big round of applause.
Thank you, Naveen. Clicker. Okay, good evening. So, tough act to follow after those guys. I hope I'm not gonna bore you too much. What I can promise you is that I'm not gonna talk about security. So don't worry, I'm not gonna bore you with like the bits and bytes and the binary stuff. What I wanted to share with you today is a bit about kind of my story, how I came to be an entrepreneur, and then talk a bit about the Demisto story of how we were like reasonably successful, I would call it like that. There's obviously much more successful companies, but I think Rishi and I are pretty happy with what we did. So a bit about myself. First of all, father of 4. You can see the picture here. At least one of them is following my footsteps in cybersecurity. She's a Stanford junior. I was born in Russia, moved to Israel when I was 6 years old, so I lived most of my life in Israel. Moved to the Bay Area in 2008, unfortunately in the most unfortunate time to move here. So I moved here and immediately the entire market crashed. So I'm saying it's because of me. But it actually served as a really, really good lesson for me as an entrepreneur, because at the time I was a founder of a startup in cybersecurity. And moving here during the crisis, I can tell you that pretty much I didn't know how I'm going to pay the next salary to the employees. It was that situation. So we had a lot of pipeline, a lot of POs coming. Everything was canceled, right? It's all gone. We went to VCs. Everybody said, no, we're not investing right now. We want to see what's going on. And so it kind of taught me about, raise and build your war chest when you can and not when you need to. So really, really good example. We'll see a bit about the Demisto story, that what we did there. And then, like I said, I owe it all to my wife of 23 years. Without her, I wouldn't be probably entrepreneur doing anything interesting. So that's a bit about me. Early career. I did, as some of you know, in Israel, you have to go to the army. That's me. I don't think any of you actually seen this picture. Yeah, that's me in the middle. So I did something that's not very usual in Israel. I studied for my Bachelor of Science in the Technion in computer science. And then I went to the army and served in a technological unit for 6 years. Which taught me a lot about entrepreneurship, because in Israel, you get a lot of responsibility at a very early age. So at 22, you're in charge of a unit, lives are in your hands, and you really have to, lift up your game, otherwise things really get wrong. Like somebody called it kinetically wrong, right? It's not cyber wrong. So that's me in the army, and it also taught me one important lesson that I find that I need to relearn always, which is get out of the building. And this is a story I always tell about my army days. We developed a system, very distributed, highly available system across many of the bases of the Israeli army. And there was one base where the system would always go down. And we were trying to debug it and trying to understand what's wrong. And we're sitting, poring over logs, and there's no log trace. It's all very mysterious. So we said, you know what? We have to go to that base and actually see what's going on. And so we go to that base, and there's, I don't know if you know those army sergeants that are lifers that kind of, have the big mustache and kind of go. So we're looking at this computer system, 8 a.m. This army sergeant goes in. It's like he says, hi, hey. Then goes, unplugs the computer, plugs in his coffee maker, makes coffee, unplugs the coffee maker, puts in the computer back. So this is why it was crashing every day, 8 a.m. Honest to God, real story. Taught us a lot about going out of the building and actually seeing your customers face to face. So after leaving the army, I opened up my consultancy firm. So, a lot of guys here are coming from that, consulting background. So I did it as well. And this kind of led me to my first startup, which was, Sentrigo. So I was doing a large consulting program for Sony Computer Entertainment here in Foster City. And I was in charge of the background of the back office billing solution for the Sony PlayStation 2, which I think is pretty. It's probably one of my most biggest bragging rights, because I have my name on many of the Sony games as a developer. So look at SOCOM 3 and a bunch of other games. You see Slavik Markovich as a developer. So I'm super happy about it. And so. at the time, I was still living in Israel and consulting to Sony. And I found it really peculiar that I could connect to the backend database of the billing system over SSH and just query whatever I want, and nobody would monitor me. So I said to myself, okay, there's probably like two options here. Either I take the 10 million credit cards, sell them on the black market for $50 a piece at the time, then become rich very, very fast, but then risk going to jail, or I will develop a solution for that. So that is kind of my first kind of entrepreneurship idea. And I developed something that's called database activity monitoring, which was a very, very, very hard problem, technological problem to solve, because we reverse engineered all the databases, relational databases out there, and would monitor the activity purely through the memory without APIs. So it was very, very tough technologically, which also taught me something. Don't develop what you want to develop as an engineer. The hard technological solutions, develop what the market wants. So that's a very important lesson that I learned. And so I ran with Sentrigo, started it in Israel, moved to the Bay Area, as I said, in 2008. And eventually, we decided to sell the company. We sold it to McAfee. And this is where I met this guy over there, Rishi, who's my co-founder in Demisto. And at the time, he was managing the PMs for a risk and compliance business unit. So he basically acquired me, and it's his fault that everything else happened. So I stayed with McAfee for exactly 4 years, pretty much to the date. We call that period VIP. Do you know, guys, what VIP means? Vesting in peace, exactly. So this was my VIP period. And then I kind of decided to move and start Demisto. So Demisto was really started, the main reason why Demisto was started, I think, is boredom and coffee. Those were the two things that started Demisto. So Rishi and I were pretty bored at McAfee, and we were kind of looking for things to do. And I got Rishi hooked on coffee. So I had a small Nespresso machine in my office, and we had adjacent offices. And every morning, Rishi would come in and drink coffee with me, and we would kind of say, hey, why are we still here? Let's do something. And we said, yeah, we're starting to do something. And then, obviously, as engineers, we wanted to do something very technically hard, right? So Rishi is an engineer, although he became our VP marketing, which is kind of a downgrade, but he started as a kernel developer, so he's an engineer. And so we wanted to do something really, really hard, which was, we wanted to, if anybody here in security, we wanted to do a cross between Carbon Black and Technion, which is basically create a very efficient, resilient peer-to-peer network that will allow organizations to answer questions about, hey, have you seen this executable somewhere, or what processes are running, and things like that. So it's kind of a very tricky question. We read a lot of academic papers about peer-to-peer and started designing on the whiteboard a lot of stuff. And then we said, okay, let's talk with customers, because what we learned before is always talk with the customer. Guess what most of the customers said? So we went to the RSA conference in 2015 and met with about 30 CISOs, so to speak. And we asked them, hey, here's this amazing solution. What do you think about it? And all of them said, another endpoint? Go, here's the door. So they basically kicked us out. So we said, oh, really? But it's really good. It's really technologically interesting. So, nobody cared. And so we asked them, okay, so what are the problems that you're facing? And this is really, really important. What are the problems that actually hurt you? And I think all of them talked about not enough skill, not enough analysts, too many alerts, too many security tools. So we said, you know what? That's a good idea. That's what we're doing. So this is how we started Demisto, by basically asking the customers and then doing exactly what they told us to do. So I think a lesson there. So that's kind of a quick story about myself, when I started, and some of the lessons learned. Then I want to quickly talk a bit about the Demisto journey so that you will have some of the timeline in front of you. So I left McAfee in April 2015. I will mention it, I was the first one to leave among the founders, so I really believed the idea first. They joined me after, so yes, I believe the idea that we didn't do. That's true. So I left McAfee in 2015. We actually signed our term sheet in July with Axel, and here's probably a shout out to Jake Flammenberg, our VC investor, who really believed in us and moved really fast, bidding out another 3 VCs that almost got the term sheet. And then we got the first money in the bank in September. Yay, $6 million. So I said to Jake, hey Jake, I'm going to Vegas with $3 million, putting it all on red, double or nothing. It's a pretty good business plan. He didn't like it, but so we decided to hire engineers and develop the product. And by the way, when I say hire engineers and develop the product, Rishi and I actually developed a lot of the product ourselves. So we're coding and doing all of that. Our first kind of GA, I say kind of because it was very initial version, was in June 2016. And we really started selling in next quarter. That was Q4 of 2016, which was really interesting because we didn't have any sales guys. So Rishi and I kind of went customer to customer and said, hey, look at that. And funnily enough, and I'm not sure, there probably are a few entrepreneurs here, or maybe a lot of entrepreneurs here. Customers, surprisingly enough, really want to talk with entrepreneurs. They hate speaking with sales guys. They want to talk with entrepreneurs. And so we actually managed to do pretty well. We did our first quarter of selling, we did 640K of ARR without sales guys, which is pretty good. So we said, hey, it's actually amazing. We cracked it. What do you do when you crack it? You hire sales guys, right? Okay, and you raise money. So that's exactly what we did. We hired our VP sales, and we hired our first sales guy, who's still with us, and he's still one of the best sales guys that we have. Yeah, Adam DeGraff, and then we looked around and said maybe we'll raise money. That's also a funny story because I was in Israel visiting our office. And I was going up on the elevator, and I had the Silence bag because Stu from Silence is a friend of mine. And this guy in the elevator just looks at me and says, how do you know Silence? And I said, yeah, I know them, and so on. Apparently, he was an investor in Silence. And from here to there, he came to visit our office and eventually decided to invest in us. So it was kind of a coincidence that was really good. And then, so we decided to raise $20 million. We raised $20 million from Clear Sky, because we thought we had it all figured out, right? We sold 640, then sales guy is probably going to sell millions, no problem. And obviously, who wants to guess how many deals we did in Q1 of 2017? We did one. So obviously, not very successful Q1. That was an interesting experience, especially after you raised 20 million and you promised the world to your VC. I have to say that both Jake and Jay from Clear Sky were very patient with us. They were saying, nothing happened, it's all good, there's a market fit, we feel it's all gonna work out. So they did not fire me, which is good. They were close, but not really firing me. And so we actually, I think, found a rhythm during 2017. And we managed to close the year at 4.4 million ARR, which is, I don't know how many of you have enterprise startups, but it's pretty decent number of first year of selling. It's not bad. So that was our 2017. Then, we did really well. I think we found our even competitive advantage. We found our stride in 2018. We were running, I didn't put it on the slide. I can say it. Is it going to be put on YouTube then? Well, we did, in 2018, we did the 20 million ARR, which was pretty nice growth. And then we actually decided to raise our C round, again, based on this idea of raise when you can, not raise when you have to. And so we had Greylock join us for a short period of time, because after closing the round in 2018, in October, we think December, we got approached by Palo Alto Networks, which was also very, very funny, because we kind of did not expect it. So they came to us, and Nikesh, the CEO of Palo Alto Networks, he kind of passed the message of, hey, I want to learn a bit about your space. Would you come and present? So Rishi and I went without preparing, without anything. We said, we're going to speak with him, and it's going to be fine. And obviously, during the presentation, we showed what we're doing and how successful we are, and we were pretty happy with ourselves. And then Nikesh kind of went on the whiteboard, drew out like his vision, and a nice big square right there saying, here you fit. Would you like to talk about something a bit more strategic? And the answer was, Rishi, you remember? I said, no, I'm happy where I am. I just raised $43 million. Thank you very much. And we left the meeting. And from here to there, obviously, he continued pinging me, and then we reached eventually an agreement. And so we were acquired in, it was signed in February, but finalized end of March for $560 million and change, because we had still all the money in the bank, so we redistributed the money. So it was actually a bit more than that. So that's kind of the timeline, the right kind of, all the stations there. So my kind of, main learning from this entire thing, which is like, 3.5 years to a pretty decent exit, is that, and I know everybody will have his own opinion, and his own kind of story to share, and probably you'll hear from others different stories. But to me, I think the most important thing that we did is we started the company with the right people. So we found so me and Rishi and our co-founders from Israel, we worked for a long time together. We knew each other very well. And that was, I think, the main thing, not the idea. And I can tell you, from my perspective, the idea for a startup is probably 5% of the success. 95% is execution, okay? And finding the right person to do it with, this is marriage, right? Rishi and I are on the same wavelength. We actually complete each other's thoughts now. So we're completely in sync. And so I think the most important piece for us was to find the right partners along the way, which is both obviously the co-founders, but also the right VCs to go on the journey with. And it all could have ended completely different. If in 2017, for example, the VC would panic and say, oh, you're doing wrong, and then just made a mess and replace us. Or, during the raising of the $43 million, for example, they were not flexible in how much they would do their pro rata and things like that. And so things could have been completely different with different partners, and probably for the worse. So that is the Demisto story. And what I would like to do now is to share in the next 5 or 6 minutes that I have, to share a bit about things that I think I learned from the startup, and then we'll have a conversation, answer some questions. So I think I already mentioned it. It's super important. Don't sit in your cubicle and develop your idea. It's never gonna work out when it meets reality, right? So our first and kind of probably the most important decision, we're really, and still are, I think, manic about talking with our customers and getting their feedback. And we have Nilima here, our PM manager of product, and she can attest that we're talking with customers daily. So we're really, pedantic about it. Get the feedback from the customer, hear what the customer has to say. He feels the pain. You're there to kind of solve it, but he has the pain. So listen to the customer. So that, I think, is probably the most important advice. If you listen to anything, listen to that. The other thing is just be there where your customers are. So some of you are in cyber, some of you are probably not. So go to the right conferences, okay? Go outside, meet your customers. And if you don't find a space for the customer, then create a space for them, okay? So that's one thing I think we did as a tactic. We tried to find somewhere where the incident responders kind of meet and exchange ideas. And we didn't find anything like that. So we created something. And so we created this community that now has 7,000 members, something like that. 8,000, nice. So it's been a really amazing experience because we created this community and then we got not only good feedback from that, but also marketing leads. So, you can get then to sell to those guys. So obviously find where customers are and go to them. Then this is another thing that we did. Find how to engage those customers in a way that is valuable to them. So give them something. Even if it's like, I know that we started, we didn't even have a product. Rishi and I went one weekend and we wrote a Slack bot to monitor Slack conversations for malicious content. So if somebody shares a file or shares a URL that is malicious, it will alert. Okay, and we gave it away. It's open source, it's free, people just download it and do it. And we wrote it before we had the product just to get the engagement from the customers. And it's still free, we give it away. The other thing we did a lot is, Rishi did a lot, I say we, but it's more in Rishi's territory, is gave away really valuable content without requiring a lot from the customer. So content that is security content that is helping the customer do his job, playbooks, articles, thought leadership pieces, all of that, just out on the website. And so we got a lot of inbound interest in inbound leads directly from that. And I can tell you as an enterprise, if you're in the enterprise space, there's nothing better than getting inbound leads that you need to follow. And we have Alex here, our inside sales leader, and he can tell you that he's not doing cold calls, right? No outbound calls, following on leads. Shh. So do this growth hacking type of thing. The other thing is that, and I'm in many cases not following my own advice, is don't be afraid to make hard decisions. Hiring or not hiring based on culture is really important, but also I think, and this is something that we all need to do a bit better, is when to fire people. And I think we need to kind of get over ourselves and our lack of comfort in doing that and actually do what's best for the business in many cases. And this is something that I'm still learning. I think we all are going through that, but that's really important. And in many cases, I think we delayed the decision, which eventually hurt us. So That's kind of the other thing. Then I guess in every stage of the company, try to identify your unfair advantage, right? What is unique about you and your solution? And to us, I think it was also product. So in the product, we had some things that none of the competitors had. We had this war room and chat ops and bots and things like that, which were pretty cool and very nice to talk about. But it's also about go-to-market. So we really emphasized our channel partners, and we worked really hard with them to get them enabled and sell through them. So that, I think, made us a bit unique in this space. And then don't be too cheap, I guess. To me, this is, I usually say that for us, it was hiring of the softer skills. So as engineers, we tend to look down on some of the HR departments and recruiters and things like that because, hey, they don't create any code, so they're not interesting. But that's a big mistake, I think. And we, throughout our journey, hired almost always too late for those type of roles. And so don't be too cheap, meaning don't go the Silicon Valley way of just splashing all your money, but on the other hand, know when to hire and what, and the roles to hire. And I guess, execution is really important. I see a lot, and this is a mistake I see a lot of founders do. They obsess about the competition. And we're always, Rishi and I are of the same mind. Like, yeah, monitor, see what they're doing, but don't care that much, right? Focus on your own execution and just be better than them. So that's I think, really important. Every kind of day, think of what you can do better than you did yesterday. Don't care about the competition. Just think about yourself. And I guess on a personal note, again, very, very different from my previous startup. I can say this is one of my biggest learnings. In Sentrigo, in my previous startup, I worked the first 2 years, 18-hour days, nonstop. So 6 a.m., midnight, 6 a.m. to midnight, pretty much every day. It kills you. Okay, you stop thinking correctly after a while. And so I think for this startup, as being older and hopefully a bit smarter, we kind of stopped and learned to breathe a bit. And so if you come to the office, even before the acquisition, it's not after the acquisition type of thing. Before the acquisition, 4:35 p.m., it's pretty much empty. So I would go home, okay? Stay with the family, with the kids, do sports. Got my black belt in Taekwondo. Yeah. So learn to kind of breathe and find time for yourself. Otherwise, there's always something more to do. So if you don't do it for yourself, nobody else will. So that's one thing. And the other thing, I tried to be a bit more organized is, and getting things done, zero inbox, whatever works for you but find your own method to the madness. If that every morning, kind of sort your inbox, whatever works for you. Getting things done, like assign tasks to do in the car, assign tasks to do in the office, assign tasks to do at the home, like whatever works for you, at least get method to the madness. So I have my timer stopped. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Hopefully have a seat. I think we'll have a Q&A now. So thank you so much for an inspiring story. And let's give you a big round of applause again.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start with first question, then it's open all of you. So please feel free to ask Any questions?
Nothing too hard. Nothing too hard. So,
And whatever he wants to answer, you answer.
so he's first.
So I'm gonna let me ask him first question. Can I? So anyway, my question is, so if you reflect, you did 2 startups, and going back to your childhood, is there anything you think that probably you go back and think about and think that there was something that which wanted to make you become an entrepreneur, like
Yeah. I don't know if we need. I don't know if we need the mic. Do we need the mic?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So my voice. So the question was, going back to childhood, did I have something that kind of triggered this need to be an entrepreneur? And I think being an immigrant as a child really changes you a bit. So I moved to Israel when I was 6-something years old. I didn't know a word in Hebrew. And so it kind of forced you to get through this program of accelerated learning and kind of managing yourself, like being a bit more independent and managing yourself. And I think it kind of stuck a bit. So hopefully it's a good experience because my kids are also immigrants to the US, so hopefully it will work for them as well. But I think being an immigrant as a child kind of triggered something.
Thank you. Now you can have,
So-
I think this gentleman had wanted to ask, can you give him a mic, please?
Yep.
Oh.
So my first question was, I fully agree with you, customer focus is very key. But customers are prospects, or industry leaders, or real customers. Mm-hmm. How do you prioritize between, customers you have to execute and produce well, and they may have some demanding which may give redirection to your product, versus industry going you one way, and the prospects who you're interested in selling, because you could overdo it that way.
Well, yeah, I'd love to sit here and say, hey, I have this amazing rule of thumb that can, solve your problems. But unfortunately, it's not like that. I think it's a balancing act. And as a startup, you have to always balance between your next set of customers or your prospects and your existing customers, making one happy while creating the features for the other one. It's not an easy balance to do. I really believe that the most important thing you can have is happy customers. So if you have your customers deployed and happy, they are your best ambassadors out there to help get the next prospects. We got to a place where people would buy from us without doing a POC just because their neighbor bought from us and is happy. So I think, again, I would put a lot of most emphasis on existing customers, and as a startup, again, sorry for the long answer. As a startup, I think at every stage, you don't want too many customers. I mean, customers are great, but at the seed stage, if you find 5 that are happy and swear by your product, that's you did something. You did enough to get you to the next stage. And you have 50. Then you did enough to the next stage. And so I wouldn't go running after the next shiny thing. Make sure your existing customers are happy and obviously balance with the new features and the new things. Sure.
Slavik, that was an amazing presentation and an incredible journey to both of you. It's just astounding. I'm also really interested, like most of us, struggled to raise our seed round of even, $500,000. Your first round was, I think, $6 million. And I'd be really interested to understand, how did you do that? What valuation did you do?
I have 3 words to that. Second-time entrepreneur. It's very easy. Once you are successful once, it's way easier to do the second one. So that's probably, I think, the meat of it, right? I think, obviously you have to have the right idea. You have to really believe and show what you're trying to do. But when we raised the round, it's not like we had a product. We didn't. We had a very nice PowerPoint. Rishi, you want to say something?
I think the only other piece. The only other piece, I think second-time entrepreneur has a lot to do with it, right? I mean, founding team did have history. It was the right balance founding team. Slavik and other folks had done a startup. The only other thing which I think goes back to Slavik's point on customers is at that point of time, we actually had 6 or 7 customers who were ready to talk to VCs that right approach, why is it the differentiated approach, why is the industry going this way? And I think it's almost like, I'm going to go extreme on this, it's like if you got your product validation and customers right, money raising will become way easier and you won't have to spend time on it. So that's what you would focus on early. And if you don't have the customer validation product right, then probably you have more work to do there.
Okay, great.
See, Rishi has better answers than me.
Great. Hi, Slavik. Great talk. My name is Jason Ma. I have a lot of friends in Israel, and I love the IDF, right? It's like the entrepreneurship factory or something like that. Now, we probably share old friend Yossi Vadi, good old friend of mine.
I know
Great
Yossi.
guy, and I got I love Israel. Now, can you tell us some moments that you had at IDF that you within the genesis phase of your entrepreneurship career?
So, nothing classified, right? No, I'm just kidding. Nothing in my story is too classified. I think, again, it's this being thrust at a very early age with a lot of responsibility. I think that is a big part of it. The other, there's an Israeli mentality, which is we really like to improvise a lot. And so people are just getting shit done. In sometimes in weird ways, and it can go, as an advantage, especially in early stage of a startup, and it's a big disadvantage when you're managing a big company because you just improvise away and kind of cut all the process out of it. But I think, to me, is mainly getting the responsibility at 22 to do quite a lot of, serious, work, managing people, and developing something that's meaningful. That was at least my experience.
Slavik, my name is Tony. Here, congratulations. I mean, you guys
Thank you.
did an amazing job. One of the things I wanted you to talk about is when you started, SOAR wasn't there. I mean, there were companies talking about automation. There was many of your friends on Exabeam, they had tried to shift to this market. Oliver started, his company,
Right.
And then there's many other players still in SOAR, and I think they're SOAR, by being there right now. Out of all the things that you talked about, right, what would you really, attribute? I think the people side makes a lot of sense, but there's more than just that, right? Because there wasn't a boxing ring. You came in, you were in the first, right? But you guys did something different, execution. How is it that you and maybe Phantom had the right exits, but there's still many of the IDF guys, right? Simplified, swim lane,
He knows his stuff.
I know, and DF Labs, and I can go on, right? So they have been suffering, and you also weren't just unique in cybersecurity. When you started, it was like 3,000 cybersecurity startups, right? And there's 4,000. So how do you differentiate yourself?
Wow, that's a good question. Yes, so I had Rishi, which is kind of a cheat in the game. So we just I think you're right. I think when we started, there were quite a lot of other startups in this space. The space was not yet defined, but there were a lot of startups. You mentioned Phantom, and Simplify at the time did something else, but there were Swimlane and a bunch of others. And I think we, as a company, decided on the product side to do something very different, which is instead of focusing on the back end of doing, connecting system A to system B, we try to focus on philosophically on putting ourselves in front of the analyst, front and center, and making sure that he's doing all of his job, or he can do all of his things inside Demisto. And so philosophically, I think we were very different than all the other companies that were mostly focused on the automation orchestration. We did that as well, obviously, but I think we actually thought that we need to solve the problem for the analyst of where to do his job. But if you ask me what made us, I think, unique, is a lot of the marketing efforts that we did and how we went out there, created the community, shared a lot of content, did a lot of thought leadership pieces, had the best merchandise, shirts. I'm still wearing the shirts and the socks and the underwear. And so I think marketing-wise, we just made ourselves known out there. And I think, it's all Rishi did most of the work here, so it's his, claim to fame. But it was, I think, a good combination. And I have to say also, it's a lot about the timing. So, I'm sitting here sounding smart, but it's about the timing of where we went to market that helped us a lot. Obviously, without the execution, it wouldn't help, but the timing was a lot. And I have to say that I'm very thankful to Phantom especially, both for Phantom Cyber was or is our competitor. And without them, they're kind of starting the market, that's one, and then selling for $350 million, that kind of set the bar. And we were very happy the day they sold, because we were saying, oh my God, that's awesome. Now the market is on the radar and there's a bar. So we will be above that bar.
So by the way, Tony, Phantom Cyber co-founder, CTO will be here on November 12th, so you can sign up.
You can ask him the question.
But Steve, what I heard you say is timing, a little bit of luck, because there was no SOAR market per se.
Yeah.
And I think the other part I heard is give, and you shall receive.
Yes, so a lot of it was, as I said, just give the customers what they need, manic, attention to what customers really need, and, having Rishi, which we said in the beginning is probably the best.
Rishi, let's give a big round of applause to Rishi also. All right.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm the other Rishi from Western Digital.
Okay.
My question is, you mentioned about culture, that it's very important to have people with good culture. Can you elaborate more on that? What do you mean by that? Because it can be a lot of things for different people.
Of course. So to us, I think in many respects, the biggest hiring, yay or nay, was kind of trying to fit the right culture to the company. And it's not to say, we hired only, specific type of people, but we looked at a few things that were really important for us. One, I think, I'm going to swear a bit, don't be an asshole. So that was critical for us. And there's a lot of amazing sales guys out there, for example, that are just assholes. So life is too short. I don't want to work with such people. Rishi doesn't. So I think that was one thing. The other thing is that we looked a lot at the approach a person takes to, the problems in front of him, the enthusiasm that he has, the energy level, how smart or, how he tries to tackle the problem from different angles. And I think that was really, really important for us. And third, I think we actually did try to create this environment of inclusion. So we had, I think, 50% of our US office female from different, areas of the world, immigrants from US and so on. So I think that's also important, getting a different, point of view than what your experience than That's important as well. But I think the rule number one is don't hire assholes. Sure.
Slavik, thank you very much for sharing your story with all of us tonight. And I can definitely relate to being an immigrant and coming from Russia. We share that. What is one single piece of advice you would give to anybody from your experience as an entrepreneur, having been in the Army, and as a parent? Raising children and being either an entrepreneur or supporting an entrepreneur.
Mm.
What is your single piece of advice to that parent for the child or for the children?
Wow. Okay. So first of all, I would again say that I would not be here probably without my wife helping me take the other side of the equation. So I have 4 kids. It requires work. we all know. And so, taking a lot of the load from me was really important. I think it's something that you can balance. And again, this comes a bit from maturity in understanding that you actually need this breathing time between work to spend time with the family. And this, I think, we did really well in Demisto, is kind of taking the break, spending time with the family. That's important. I think there's no silver bullets here, right? Being an entrepreneur, and this is probably obvious to all of you, it's gonna take a lot of your time, and you're gonna, family is gonna suffer, and it's a sacrifice that you're making. So it is a sacrifice that you're making for something that drives you. Either it is the problem space and like your wish to actually solve a really big problem, or financial, whatever drives you, it is a sacrifice. But I think kind of balancing that act is really important. So, and I think, by the way, Rishi is doing an amazing job. Again, sorry, Rishi, for putting you on the spot, but I think his wife is busier than he is. Shweta is, working at Facebook, busier than Rishi, but they manage.
I think I'd like to add, right? And I think this is...
Here, Rishi. Oh.
I think this is it's very interesting, right? I mean, all of my friends consistently ask, like, how are you home at 6 if you're running a company? And I think it happened probably unsaid. It wasn't like Slavik and I agreed that we're going to leave office at 5 in the evening or 4:30 in the evening. But I think it was a surprise and a shock to me as well in the beginning of Demisto. And I kind of give a lot of this credit to Slavik's. Like, I remember a very vivid story. We had a big demo to the head of SOC for NetApp back then. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. The demo was like at 9 a.m. in the morning. And Slavik gets up, says, okay, I'm going. And I was like, where are you going? It's like, Taekwondo. It's like, no, but we have a demo. And nothing was working. It's like, what do you mean? I have Taekwondo. It's like, okay. And he leaves. It's like, here I was, it was a single room, which was like, okay,
This is before we actually had an office. We are
this
in a room.
So it's like, okay, now what? It's like, he left, nothing is working. But guess what? The demo went fantastic the next day morning. And I think the point is, and again, I've seen this in other people as well, the discipline to cut off. If you have a meeting, you have a meeting. If you have a commitment, you have a commitment. If he has a Taekwondo, he does this. And that instills behavior in the entire company. And that instills behavior is like, okay, guys, don't stress it out. It's going to happen. It's okay. It will take place. But the point was, after it's done, we were online back at 7. We worked crazy hours. We got it done, where we got that break with the family. The one part that is harder is you could be there, which I did not do for first 2 years till my wife called it out, is I was there, but I was not there. So even those 3-4 hours when I was there is like something was in my mind. Even though I turned off the phone, it was away. It was on my mind. I was phased out. And then a couple of friends called it out. My wife called it out. And I think that's the learning. It's okay. I think it's tough to be an entrepreneur, but build that discipline. Cut out for that evening 3-4 hours.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I told you guys he's answering the better answers. So.
Hi, Slavik. Great hearing you tell your story. My name is Smita, and I'm a budding founder. The company that I intend founding is called the Board IQ. It's about an AI and ML-enabled technology platform that's going to help all aspects of inclusion, which is the first pilot is going to be about getting more women on boards. Very interesting to hear about the community that you created, especially the 600-member community, the 6,000-member community that you spoke about. Possible to share some best practices in terms of how you went about identifying your key customers initially, both on the enterprise as well as consumer side, because that's the key to success. Was it because that you already were an entrepreneur that you succeeded, or what are some of the best practices from your perspective?
So before my marketing folks kill me, it's already 8,000. So, I think people, again, I'm sitting here, but I cannot even take credit for that, because I think people were very thirsty to find that community, and we just provided for them the platform. I think our smartness was in identifying the need and providing the solution for that. Because at the time, there were no other communities specifically there. And so what we did with a little of Slack hacking, so I kind of reverse engineered some of the protocol and said, you can invite directly from the website. So we enabled this community, but I don't know if we really hunted after people. People just joined because they were looking to join, but we enabled them. Speaking of inclusion, women, cybersecurity is tough from that perspective. Really tough. Like I'd say 90%, maybe more, 95%, or yeah, it's a really tough problem to crack. We're trying. So hiring, women and trying to be inclusive as much as possible, but it's very hard to find, people.
So this intelligent platform that I'm creating is hoping to showcase people.
Very nice, a very worthy goal. Yeah, cool.
Hi, thanks again. Great presentation. I want to piggyback a little bit on what we just heard, the recent question, and that is specific to content, though. So you mentioned that you created a lot of content for this community, and I'm curious, can you describe how that changed as you went from early seed, towards your acquisition? Because content creation, I imagine, looked very different from that early stage to the latter. Maybe talk a little bit about budget for content creation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. How did the content change? So I'd say in the beginning, I think we created a lot of the content ourselves. And one of the things that I mentioned before is to learn to kind of trust your instincts when you hire and find the people who are enthusiastic and full of energy and hire them. So we hired this amazing guy. He's he's a machine in creating content, no experience, straight out of college. And he turned out to be, he was so shy in the interview. Rishi, you remember, he was so very, very, very shy and very closed, but we kind of managed to tease that out of him and found that he's so energetic. And apparently this guy is so funny. So I think if you ask how it changed, we found this guy and now all of our content is very funny. It's amazing. He speaks with this D-bot, our bot voice, and he does those comic strips and so on. So the topics are serious, but the guy is funny. And this is finding the right people and making a bet on the energy, even if they don't have the necessary experience. And making the bet on the person, I think, is really important.
I mean, amazing story indeed, no doubt about that. You have to be congratulated. So one thing that I want to, at least you guys to talk about, I mean, you raised funding. I mean, I mean, it was, it was pretty easy. And I think earlier you mentioned, why did that happen? So you said, well, second time entrepreneur. But I'm pretty sure it was still not a cakewalk. Even just because second time entrepreneurs. So could you talk about that, the challenge? Because a lot of entrepreneurs, they want to know because they're raising capital and they, how do you, deal with the VCs investors and how do you stand out? Why they love you? So can you talk about that?
Of course. First of all, Alex, just so you know, your pink sheet is waiting for you. Just kidding.
Calling Europe for business.
That's it. Now he's going to be selling in Alaska or something. So, yeah, raising money is never trivial, of course. It's much easier after you've been an entrepreneur and you proved that you know what to do to make yourself successful. But it's always a journey with a lot of meetings, a lot of disappointments, a lot of hearing no. And you need to learn to hear no and still be, persistent and continue doing what you're doing. I think for us, the main thing was we had a pretty good idea of what we wanted to do. And we had a few customers that were willing to swear by that idea, that it's really, really missing and it's needed. And I think that's the best kind of material you can go to raise money. Because VCs will first look at the team and then look at the TAM and the idea, right? And if you come equipped with the answers to both, I think you have a better chance. That being said, again, at least I think there's a bit of a skew in how cybersecurity is viewed and the amount of money there is in cybersecurity. So I think if you want to raise in cybersecurity, it's a bit easier than in some other fields and so on. Maybe a funny story about that. So when we raised our Series A, we raised from Jake, and we kind of met him at RSA in one of the parties before, and I have to say that I didn't remember him at all. And we were meeting with a bunch of other VCs, and suddenly, out of the blue, I'm getting this email from Jake, and we were just about to kind of go close with somebody else, and he says, "Hey, would you like to meet?" And he moved so fast, and he were convinced in the direction that we were going, that it was pretty funny. But the funny story I want to share is actually when we closed the terms. Hopefully Jake is not watching that, but but yeah, it was pretty funny because before we raised the round, the co-founders kind of agreed on the valuation, and we said, okay, we will start with this number, and we're willing to go up to there and no more for the pre-money valuation. And I'm sitting with Jake and Rishi as well. We're sitting at the table, and he kind of puts the term sheet on in front of us, and the number that he has there is the number that we wanted to start with. So it's a high number. Oh. So here I am sitting with a straight face, looking Jake in the eye and saying, Jake, I'm very disappointed with this offer. I thought Excel is much better than that. So I was straight kind of looking at him and just saying, man, this is a terrible offer. And of course, we managed to raise quite a bit beyond that, but no, it's a funny story I thought of sharing.
Awesome. That's good. Pay attention, okay?
I wanted to build on the same question. it would have been, I'm presuming, a challenge to convince your Series C investor of the exit just after the investment. Can you share some thoughts on how you were able to convince them?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and you're exactly right. Yeah, it's a tough question, and it's not an easy conversation. So I think you start with the conviction of the founders that this is the thing that they want to do, right? So we had, I don't know even how much, how many meetings internally and how many change of mind we had between one morning and the other. One morning we would wake up and say, oh, the market is going to crash in 2019. We have to sell. This is the right opportunity. The next morning, oh, but it's going so well. We shouldn't sell. It's like we're like up there. Let's wait for $1 billion and then we'll sell. So, but once we reach this conviction internally, and this is again going back to my point at finding the right partners, it's almost impossible for the VC to say no if the founder wants to sell. That would be really shooting yourself in the leg. It's killing your reputation as well. So when we decided that this is the right move and the right home for the technology, I met with Sarah, our Greylock investor, and I kind of told her, look, this is what we want to do as a founder. And she said, we'll support you in whatever you want to do. This is not my preference, but we'll support you. I don't think they made a bad deal. In 4 months, it was about $60 million profit. That's not bad. I would sign for that as well. So it wasn't a bad deal for them, but it was not an easy conversation. To her, to her credit, I would say that eventually, after they understood that we are serious, they were all very supportive. So Axel, Clear Sky, and Greylock, amazing support. Especially, I have to say, Jay from Clear Sky was like my psychologist at that time. So I would call him every day, and he would kind of walk me through and kind of make me more relaxed.
I had a question.
Oh, sorry.
You said the team is the main core. So how do you make sure to have some strategies when you start up to keep your team around? Because they are good people, energetic people, and it's hard to, they probably believe in your product, but then if you have to go for the long haul, what strategies or any tips you would give to stay put together? Basically.
Right. So first, kind of the funny answer. They didn't have time to leave. Right. It was just 3.5 years, so they were not vested yet. That's, I guess, the funny answer. But I think it's about the culture in the company, the atmosphere in the company. At least and I think I can speak for others as well, when you go to the office with a smile and a lot of energy, that makes a huge difference. So for us, it was a culture of, very transparent, over-communicating, like very open, no hierarchy at all. So people would come and say, hey, come play with me ping pong and beat me up and so on. So completely non-hierarchical. And I think that kind of energy in the company, that's what's going to keep them. So it's not about pay. I think it's more about the experience they have while working with you. And we managed to keep, I think, the vast majority of our employees, really the vast majority, from the inception.
Thank you. So changing the topic a little bit, second-time entrepreneurship is very different than first time. So now moving back, when you are doing first time, and people I mentor are mostly first-time guys, right? They need, what advice would you give them, in terms of positioning the company, in terms of the team, because they can't get the best team like you were able to, they may not have the same kind of experiences. What's the domain knowledge is different. Mm-hmm. So when do you think, and how would you approach even a seed round, or what you did when you were first starting off in your first case, and what worked and what did not work?
So I'd say, well, a couple of things. As a first-time startup, first of all, don't learn from me in my first startup. It was very successful, but it was a very hard problem and very hard thing to sell to customers. I think that was a big challenge for us. I'd say as a first-time entrepreneur, always find a good mentor to help you, kind of guide you through the process. And even a second-time entrepreneur, I mean, we had ourselves, it's 4 co-founders, so it was very easy to kind of talk amongst each other, but we also had a lot of help along the way with mentors on the go-to-market side and mentors overall of being a CEO. I think it's really important. So find the right person to kind of guide you and also be your psychologist. I think you, as a CEO, you encounter a lot of decisions and there's a lot of insecurity and very tough decisions, so kind of guide you through the process. Then I think I would say find something that you are passionate about. I think that's the other thing. If you're passionate about, you'll find a way to make it happen. That's kind of, and everything else I said is already said.
Slavik, I have a question. So every stage where we got the VCs, and I'm a Demisto employee, early Demisto employee, what was the deciding factor to kind of go with one VC versus another at every stage? Mm-hmm. And you mentioned there were 4 term sheets, and something about Jake kind of was there that you decided, of course, like they have to be willing to give you the money, but at every 3 stages, and I saw that, and that like, how do you decide Jake versus Jay versus Greylock at that point?
No, so that's really important.
Yeah.
Don't take the highest number. We didn't. So in 2 rounds, we had higher offers and we didn't take them. I think in a lot of things, it's very personal. So those guys or women, they are going to work with you very closely in very stressful situations. You really don't want to choose somebody that's going to make it harder for you instead of make it easier for you. Mm-hmm. So the reason we chose Jake and Axel, first of all, Axel obviously is a tier A VC, so that really worked well, but we had other tier A VCs. I think Jake really impressed us in how he really were passionate about the problem space, and he's a product guy, so he came from Splunk. He really understood us and understood what we're trying to do, and I think that really impressed us. And he moved really, really fast, so that was also, I think, really impressive because we try to move fast as well. We make decisions all the time, and so that was really important. And moving forward in the next round and the next round, there are many other considerations. So I'd say, obviously, the people that you work with are probably the most important thing. But for example, when we raised our Series C, we decided not to raise from Axel again, even though the term sheet was very good, because we wanted to diversify the people around the table. And we wanted to have, because we were planning to go all the way and do an IPO, so we wanted to have many deep pockets around the table and not one. Mm-hmm. And because things happen. So as you know, Jake moved from one VC to another. Suddenly another person replaced him, Ping, which by the way is awesome, but still, things happen. And you want to prepare for those eventualities when you raise money. So there's a lot of considerations, but I would say the main one is who do you want to be married to? Like who you want to work with.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. So first, thank you for sharing your journey. It's very interesting how you went all the way from Russia, Israel, now to the US and create your own companies. That's just amazing. So you mentioned that when you were raising money, it was almost like a dating process. So you were evaluating multiple options, choosing the one that you like the most based on your criteria.
It is exactly dating.
Once you came up, made your mind in terms of being acquired, did you go through the same dating process of, okay, let me evaluate other potential companies to be acquired?
Well, what was that, Rishi? Love at first sight. Love at first sight, yeah. So I think, great question. I think there's different approaches to that, and there's different scenarios, and people do it differently. So I heard stories that, entrepreneurs kind of shopped around after the first offer. For us, it wasn't that important. So it was critical for us to find the right home for the technology, for the people, the vision, everything. And we ourselves did not shop around at all. So we didn't go to, at the time, Palo Alto approached us, we could go to 3 or 4 other security companies and say, hey, we got an offer, do you have a better offer? We didn't even do it once because I think the offer was good enough. And then the main concerns for us were, is the vision shared? Are we going to be able to execute on that vision? And are the people going to be happy with that company? And so even though people will tell you hire a banker and go to other companies, to us, it was not the case.
Let's have one more question. Last question. Very good.
So as a technical founder, how do you decide when to stop coding, or do you ever stop?
Ouch. So I can tell you my personal case, I don't. Like you heard here, I still code. I think it's very, to me, it's very enjoyable to code. So I like to develop, I like to write code, and I do it sometimes as kind of side projects outside of my day-to-day job. So I would go, even on the weekend, I'll say, oh, I'll write this cool thing or cool feature, and I still do that. I recently did a Git query, and I'm still in the first 10 people that contributed the most code to the backend. So I'm still up there, which is on the one hand is happy for me, but also very worrying. So I don't know what's going on there. It's all about, as a founder, again, maybe going a bit more serious, as a founder, at every point in time, you have to allocate your time to what's best going to bring results to your company right now. And so in the beginning, the best thing you can do is talk with customers and code and guide the architecture. As you go further and further along, you want to hire people that are better than you at the engineering side. And so you want to kind of free your time to focus on other things. Again, I say that I still code, but that's definitely not the majority of what I do. I do, I probably code maybe a few hours a week, if that.
Let me ask the last question. So, Slavik, so what would be your advice to the entrepreneurs if, let's say, they want to start something in the security or cybersecurity area right now? Because there are so many startups, there are 3,000 plus or whatever.
So cybersecurity is tough. There's a lot of noise in cybersecurity. Thousands of startups, all kind of vying for the attention of the customer. I'd say, again, this is kind of back to my first answer or my first advice is talk with your customers or talk with your prospects. Find a real pain that you are passionate about and then try to solve that. Because if there's like real pain and you really want to solve it, you'll find the way. And I can tell you what I think is, areas of interest in cybersecurity, be that I think IoT is very, very interesting. And, the whole kind of cloud is super, super interesting. And obviously everything in the SOC is that's what we do. But I think that would be kind of the wrong approach to that. As an entrepreneur, I think you need to go and find what you're passionate about and customers care about. So if you have an intersect of caring and passion, I think you're in the right place.
So with that, anyway, let's give a big round of applause.